Bethesda just held a Q&A in their Bethesda Game Studios Discord today, giving us a ton of new information and tidbits about the lore of Starfield. So we're going to break all of this down and touch on the new Starfield timeline that was released. Let's go. Let me know your thoughts on all this new information, if it makes you more or less excited for Starfield. So Will, Shannon, Mil, Pagliarulo jumped into the Constellation Discord to give us an answer to 16 different questions. Now, none of these questions are really groundbreaking, but there is a lot of really interesting tidbits and information about the game that I think is definitely well worth covering. So I'm not going to read all of their answers word for word because there is just a lot of information in there. We'll get bogged down in just reading stuff, which you can go and do yourself, but we'll bring out the highlights. We'll talk about each question and we'll just sort of cover things in general. So firstly, we'll start with question 1, which was, can you buy houses or properties in the main cities? Both Emil and Will respond with yes, but Emil's answer is a little bit more interesting in that he says you can purchase a dwelling in all the major cities in the game, and there is at least one that is specifically for completing ... something. So assumedly some sort of like quest reward, or, you know, maybe completing a faction quest, you get like a, you know, a penthouse suite in some sort of a town, maybe in Neon or something. Like, that's just speculation, but something like that when you complete like a major quest line, I suspect you'll probably get a house or an apartment or something like that. Question 2, if we get the kid stuff trait, will our parents be generated based on our character's looks, or will there be standard parents put in place? Reading Emil's answer, yes, totally. Just as we did with Fallout 3 with your dad and Fallout 4 with your son, in Starfield, if you take the kid stuff trait, your parents are based off of you. No spoilers, but I think fans will really appreciate the actors we got to play those roles, and they just get so into it. It's awesome. While we haven't seen too much about the kid stuff sort of trait other than just the fact that it exists, that does make me more interested in picking up kid stuff. Like, I wasn't super interested in having to give money to some NPCs when, you know, money's valuable and I like money myself.
Hello, I like money.
You know, I am interested to see what they actually look like depending on my look, and also who those voice actors are. If they're teasing that they're someone important, I'm curious to know who those are. Question 3 was a long one about if Starfield is okay to play as your first BGS game, but the main point here is how deep is the character's backstory. Will says that there is a trait and background system that will let you specify more about yourself, but you can also select an anonymous background and no traits if you want. And Emil says that as far as going into a character's backstory, that's entirely up to you, and it's all about the head canon. So very similar, I guess, to every other BGS game in that you are playing an existing character in the world. Like, you're already an adult. Like, you know, you remember how you get captured at the start of Skyrim, or, you know, you've got a kid at the start of Fallout 4, that sort of a thing. But you are very impressionable in that the character is sort of like a blank slate, except for those couple of elements. And it seems like Starfield would be exactly the same in that you'll boot up the game and you'll start the game in the same place as everyone else. You'll have like that one or two like generic things that are unique to your character that sort of pushes you into the world, and everything else around that is what you impress onto your character themselves. Question 4 is, how will the smuggling cargo system work? Can we hide it somewhere on the ship and sell it for more currency later? Will says that certain items are considered contraband and you'll need to smuggle them past security ships that are in orbit of major settlements. And Emil says that there are specific items that are considered contraband, meaning they are pretty much illegal everywhere. And yes, you can hide them using special ship modules you can purchase. So, you know, don't get caught with those harvested organs. So that's interesting that it seems like we can transport organs around. But I think the main thing here is we speculated in our ship breakdown video about how there's shielded capacity, like in your shielded cargo. So assumedly that's how this does work, right? So there is going to be smuggling. You will be able to sneak contraband past security checkpoints. Assumedly that shielded cargo is potentially how you do that based on the comments here. Moving on to question 5. Will there be a jail system if we commit crimes? And Will and Emil both say yes, you can elect to go to jail or pay a fine when you are arrested, and even resist arrest and try to escape. So similar to Skyrim's system, as Emil points out, but as Starfield is more civilized, there's a government, there's laws, and obviously crimes and punishment for those things. Number 6, will time pass when not in the game? For example, my trade routes, outposts, and mining operations continue to produce, or does it only occur when actively playing? And the answer here is just when actively playing. And that sort of makes sense. Like, you know, it's obviously for a sim aspect, it's maybe not as exciting, but if you think about the fact that if you're not playing the game and you're still just like generating income from like your trade routes and stuff, then you open the game and you've got like a gazillion dollars, that's maybe not like good for the economy of the game, right? Because it just gives you access to everything. Question 7, can you be a double agent in the game? For example, if you join the United Colonies, can you also join the Crimson Fleet and give the United Colonies information? What factions have that feature if they do? Now, interestingly, they sort of answered this indirectly like ages ago in one of the Starfield like sort of dev videos they did, but essentially they give us a bit more information on that here. So all playable factions can be completed independently. Emil says that the infiltration, double agent stuff is exactly what you can do with the Crimson Fleet and the United Colonies. So essentially what happens here is in the Crimson Fleet storyline, it does feature the option to be an undercover agent inside the fleet on behalf of the United Colonies SysDef, which is a specific military branch of the United Colonies. I think it was Emil who actually mentioned this in one of those dead videos about how you can do this specifically with the Crimson Fleet. So even though the playable factions can be completed independently, they do seem to interact in that way. And I fully expect that the United Colonies is going to interact with the Freestar Collective because of their history, same as how Freestar Collective interacted with them, that sort of thing. But you can complete them independently. You don't have to do that. So it seems like it's potentially like diverging paths. But again, we'll have to wait and see specifically once we have played the game. Question 8 is quite an interesting one. Will you be able to play the game in a pacifist mode without killing anyone or even potentially anything? Now, they essentially the answer here, like across their responses, is just generally no. Like Will says, you can't guarantee every mission can be completed in a pacifist way, but we do have a couple of systems that will help. The main thing that comes out of this comment here is that speech challenge system, which we have seen slightly throughout the direct, but essentially Will does say here that you can use the speech challenge system to persuade someone to do something like not fighting you, that sort of a thing. And Emil also mentions that there is non-lethal weapons in the game, so essentially you could use some of those speech challenge tactics and those non-lethal weapons, but they can't guarantee that you can complete it entirely without actually killing anyone. And it does sort of make sense, I guess, like, you know, if you think about just like hostile creatures and stuff in the world, right? You're gonna have to sort of take them out, like if they're coming towards you, or even in some storylines, maybe like there's just like requirements to it. But I'd love to see someone like push that envelope and see how far they can go without actually killing anyone. Question 9: what other beliefs and basic histories of the religions we can join? The Sanctum Universum, Enlightened, and the Great Serpent. I love this question, right? So Emil does point out that the IRL religions, so the ones we have in our world today, are actually in the game, which is really surprising and interesting to me because most games sort of steer clear of that stuff. But when talking about the religions based on the game itself, the Sanctum Universum is a couple of decades old in our timeline, but has gained a lot of prominence. They believe that God is out there somewhere in the universe and that humanity's ability to travel the stars brings us closer to God. The Enlightened, however, are an atheist group that focuses on humanitarian and community work. They believe that life is something every person has to take responsibility for, so that if they want the world to be a better place, we have to do it ourselves. Really interesting. I am curious to know what that means. And Emil also points out that they practice what they preach through various community outreach programs. Now, House Va'ruun, the Great Serpent, this one is super cool. So Emil says that the gossip among the guards is this: a colony ship sets off for a new world, making grab jumps along the way. After one of the grab jumps, one of the passengers claimed to have spent their time communing with a celestial entity known as the Great Serpent. What was a few seconds for everyone else was much longer for him, and it brought back a mandate, which is basically get on board or be devoured when the Great Serpent encircles the universe. Is it true? I ain't saying. So in the game, you sometimes face off against House Va'ruun zealots as an enemy group, and that's their motivation. I recently got the House Va'ruun logo tattooed on my wrist, so yeah, I dig them. They sound really cool, and we've seen heaps of their robots and just like their zealots in the direct as well. Like they did sort of present that sort of front and center for us, and obviously being one of the traits that we can join, assumedly we can learn more about that. And if the Great Serpent is real, like is there going to be like a world serpent that's going to consume the world? Very Norse-esque to me, like with the world serpent, you know, circulating the world, that sort of a thing. Really like that. Really like that religion. All right. Question 10. How many companions total will we be able to recruit? And both Will and Emil say that there is 20 total, but the main focus is on the Constellation companions. So 4 of them are from Constellation and have the most story interaction with the player, but all of the named characters have their own backgrounds and can follow you around, e.g. carry your burdens. We'll give some more context about how companions companions are really important in their games, and they're always things that people gravitate towards. Like Piper always comes to mind for me for Fallout 4. I found her to be really interesting. But in all Bethesda Game Studios games, the companions stand out. There's always like one favorite. I'm curious to know what yours is in the comments, guys. Let me know across all the Bethesda games what your favorite companion is. Question 11. When we assign crew members to work on outposts, do we have to pay them salaries? Yes, you will, but only once. So they mention here about how the economy may have got a bit complicated if you had to pay them regular salaries, but there is an upfront cost. But interestingly as well, you can use that speech challenge game to negotiate over that actual one-time payment, like how much you have to pay them, which I think is really interesting, and apparently traits can affect that as well. Question 12. Will our companions be able to level up their perks? Will their perks stack with ours? So all crew start with a set of skills at specific ranks, but they don't level up, but will come with these skills at different ranks depending on the companion. The companion skills are a mix of like role-playing flavor, but also will stack with your own skills. So you might meet a character that's especially good at rifles, and you can hire them to watch your back, or you might meet an astrodynamics expert that will increase your grav drive range when assigned to your ship. So I guess a good example here, right, is using Barrett. He has Starship Engineering, Particle Beam Weapon Systems, and Robotics, and Gastronomy. So Starship Engineering and Particle Beam Weapon Systems obviously will help with your ship's like abilities, whatever those specific skills are. Robotics is increasing your damage against robot type enemies, but Gastronomy is like the chef skill. So assumedly that's sort of flavor. Like I don't know if Barrett will be cooking meals for us, but it seems like that's what they're sort of referring to with some of these that are maybe like flavor. They don't actually do anything. Like they're about the characters' backgrounds and interests. 13. What are your favorite parts of the game? Emil says shipping it, which obviously I can totally agree with, but Will says that he loves finding content that I haven't seen yet or forgot about, and our games are so big that no one person is likely to have seen it all, even after all our passes and levels of review. And Emil sort of echoes that in a way, but sort of mentions that personally he's seen every quest line, every city, every major piece of content in the game at every stage of development, and for him it's the real pleasure of seeing how they've all evolved into the versions they are today and the versions everyone here will play. He has a real soft spot for Neon, which I totally agree with. I love the look of Neon. I can't wait to get there, and sort of points out about how it's a cyberpunk style sentiment. But 14 is what books or movies had a big influence on some of the quests. Will points out that he is a big history nerd and he likes podcasts like Hardcore History and the History of Rome. And Emil points out that he is into like all the old school sort of sci-fi stuff like Star Wars, OG, Battlestar Galactica, Space 1999, Buck Rangers, Battle Beyond the Stars, Ice Pirates, and let's not forget about the classic that is Metal Storm, The Destruction of Jared Zinn. I've heard of like 2 of these things, I'll be honest. Like I'm not super read on sci-fi lore, but obviously I've heard of Star Wars, guys. Like that's definitely one that I've heard of, right?
Live long and prosper.
But he also mentioned some modern day things like some of the writings from Arthur C. Clarke and Robert Heinlein, as well as films like Contact, Interstellar, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and Event Horizon. But I'm really interested in those Easter eggs that are going to be in the game. Like I can't wait to come across Easter eggs from like sci-fi stuff that we know. God, I hope there's a Firefly Easter egg in this game. I am going to be hunting that down like you wouldn't believe. All right, moving on to question 15. What are some favorite small details in Starfield that add to the immersion? Emil says that although humans are living in space and our aesthetics is very much NASA punk, it feels like a very lived-in universe, and you can see that everywhere. Will points out that he loves the outfits, and you can see the seams and materials, especially on the spacesuits. And then Emil mentions that how everyone may love sandwiches, but there are books lying around and the notes on the bulletin boards, the environmental storytelling that our level designers and world artists are so good at, and also they both mention buttons. Books is the big pull out here, I think, right? So in the Elder Scrolls games, you obviously have tons of books that you can read, and they're very interesting, some of them. And in Fallout, it's like the computers, there's all that information on the computers that you can find. So that history of telling stories through things you can find in the world and that environmental storytelling is definitely going to be here, which is fantastic. Like it's some of the best content in Fallout games, especially Fallout 4. There's a tons of locations that, you come into them and they're just like there's just enemies in there, but the story is actually told through the terminals that are in the game and just like where the characters are in the world and stuff. Really like that stuff in Fallout and Skyrim. So glad to see that that's still here for Starfield. Now, the last question is, what is the history of the mechs? And Emil says that the mechs is a good one. So we showed that this is a bit through the animated shorts. The mechs are leftovers from the Colony War. Colony War being singular, both sides, United Colonies and Freestar Collective, had mechs, but the Freestar Collective really mastered them. The United Colonies had mechs too, but they also relied on the controlled alien beasts from their Xeno Warfare division. Think about that skill that we can get in the game, just wanted to point that out. Both of those were outlawed with the Armistice that ended the Colony War. I'm not saying that there is an old mech battleground in the game, I'm typing it. Mechs, not usable, no, they are in ruins. So those animated shorts are fantastic, by the way, and we definitely did see this in one of those animated shorts. And so it's good to get that sort of call out here that this is from the Colony War, which is where the mechs were from. There's not too much to grab out of this question here. It's more just like lore flavor. And speaking of lore, the official timeline was dropped on the Starfield website. So basically starting from as close to today as you can, from 2050, they detail what happened and how we got from, let's say, today's world to 2330, which is when Starfield begins, and how the colonies were made and the different wars. There was actually 2 wars, which is, I think, an interesting thing to point out. But if you want to read that, I'll leave a link to that in the comments down below. But thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Let me know your hype levels for Starfield. We are like 2 weeks away. Thank you to the members for supporting the channel. You guys are real ones. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.